I was 9 months pregnant when my husband yanked me out of my seat for his mother, but the way I responded stopped him in his tracks. Stay with me as I share how I stood up and showed him what family really means. And if this story moves you, don't forget to support our channel. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and share it with your loved one. Zuri Kamau walked into the grand hall with a mix of excitement and exhaustion weighing on her. 9 months pregnant, every step felt heavier than usual, but she held her posture with grace, her flowing maternity dress carefully chosen to highlight both her bump and her personal style. The room was alive with soft laughter, the clinking of glasses, and gentle music playing in the background. Colorful decorations hung from the ceiling, balloons bobbed cheerfully in the corners, and the aroma of delicious Kenyan dishes filled the air. She couldn't help but smile, feeling proud, not just of the little life growing inside her, but of everything she had built for herself. Guests mingled warmly, exchanging greetings, compliments, and stories. Some approached Zuri to admire her elegant outfit, others to offer congratulations on her soon-to-arrive baby. Yet, despite the cheerful atmosphere, Zuri felt a strange tension tugging at the edges of the evening. Her husband Jelani, usually attentive, seemed unusually distant, his eyes scanning the crowd more than resting on her. She caught him whispering quietly with his mother, Mama Aking, who gave Zuri a small, unreadable glance. Zuri's chest tightened slightly, but she brushed it off, reminding herself this was a celebration, not a battlefield. As she settled into the celebration, she allowed herself a small moment of pride, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. She had grown her fashion brand from scratch, faced countless challenges, and now, on the brink of motherhood, she was surrounded by family, at least in appearance. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight might unfold differently than she imagined, and deep down, a quiet unease began to stir. The party carried on with laughter and clinking glasses, but Zuri could feel the shift in the air. Mama Aking, her husband's mother, kept giving her sharp, calculating glances that made Zuri's skin prickle. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking perhaps she was imagining things. But as the night went on, the looks became harder to miss, small, deliberate nods and pursed lips, as if Zuri were under some kind of silent judgment. Every time Zuri caught Mama Aking's eyes on her, it felt like a quiet accusation. Zuri noticed whispers spreading across the room. Guests leaned in toward each other, voices low and conspiratorial, glancing subtly in her direction. She couldn't hear the words clearly, but she could feel the disapproval in the murmurs, the way heads turned her way and then quickly looked away. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention, but Zuri's instincts, honed through years of running her own business and dealing with judgmental critics, told her something was wrong. Then came the small comments, slyly woven into conversations. Mama Aking, with a polite smile, said things just loud enough for certain people to hear, dropping lines like, "Some people just need to know their place," or, "It's important to remember who you're really married into." The words weren't directly aimed at Zuri, but everyone around understood exactly what she meant. Zuri felt her stomach tighten, not just from her pregnancy, but from the humiliation creeping quietly into the celebration. She kept her smile polite, her posture calm, but inside, her heart was pounding. To make matters worse, Jelani seemed to drift closer to his mother's side than to her. Every time Zuri looked at him for support, she found him engaged in quiet conversations with Mama Aking or nodding along in agreement to her subtle jabs. It was as if he were letting her mother set the rules of the evening, leaving Zuri isolated in plain sight. A pang of disappointment mixed with confusion shot through her. How could he side so easily with the person who seemed determined to undermine her on the night that should have been joyful? Zuri's mind raced. She reminded herself of her own strength, the years she had worked to build her career, and the respect she commanded in her circle. But seeing the disapproval in the room, feeling the eyes on her, and noticing Jelani's quiet alignment with his mother made the evening feel heavier than it should. The whispers, the sidelong glances, and the subtle power play weren't just small annoyances. They were warnings that the celebration might not stay as harmless and festive as it appeared. And deep down, Zuri knew she had to prepare herself for whatever came next, because tonight, appearances were only part of the story, and the real challenge was just beginning. The room was buzzing with laughter and chatter when suddenly everything shifted. Zuri had just settled into a conversation with a cousin when she felt a firm hand on her arm. Before she could react, Jelani had grabbed her and was pulling her toward the side of the room. The sudden force made her stumble slightly, her heart racing and her 9 months pregnant body struggling to keep balance. "Jelani, what?" she started, but he didn't answer. His grip was tight, and his expression was cold, unreadable. He stopped near the center of the gathering, right in front of everyone, and with a voice loud enough for the guests to hear, he demanded, "Step aside, Zuri. My mother needs this seat. It's hers, she is the honored guest here." The words hit Zuri like a slap. Shock froze her in place. She was heavily pregnant, exhausted, and dressed elegantly for a celebration, and now she was being treated as if she were invisible, pushed aside for a seat. The humiliation burned hot in her chest, and a wave of disbelief rippled through her. Around them, the whispers began almost immediately. Guests who had been laughing moments before now stopped, their eyes wide, their conversations faltering. Aunts exchanged looks of concern, cousins glanced nervously at one another, and even the caterers paused in the middle of their tasks, sensing the tension. Some whispered, "Did he just?" while others muttered, "This isn't right." The air that had been warm and celebratory just minutes ago had turned heavy and awkward. Every eye in the room seemed to settle on her, some with sympathy, some with curiosity, and some with thinly veiled judgment. Zuri's mind raced. She could feel her bump shifting as she tried to steady herself, trying to make sense of what was happening. The public nature of the humiliation cut deeper than she expected. This wasn't a private argument. This was a stage, and she was the unwilling performer in a display of disrespect. She could feel the heat rising to her cheeks, the sting of embarrassment mixing with a growing surge of anger. How could the man she trusted, her husband, treat her like this in front of family and friends? Despite her shock, a small part of her mind was already thinking ahead, cataloging every reaction, every whisper, every sideways glance. She noticed relatives shifting uncomfortably, some gripping the edges of chairs, some lowering their eyes, unsure how to intervene. The scandal was spreading silently but unmistakably through the party. Zuri realized that this moment, though painful, was also a turning point. She had been humiliated, yes, but she was not powerless. Deep inside, a spark of defiance began to flicker, even as she allowed herself a small, steadying breath. The room held its collective breath, watching. And Zuri, standing there, pregnant and cornered, felt the first stirrings of something she had not felt before, a determination to reclaim her dignity, no matter the cost. Zuri felt her heart pounding, but she forced herself to stand tall, planting her feet firmly on the polished floor. The room was quiet now, all eyes on her and Jelani, the air thick with tension. She could feel her baby shifting inside, and the discomfort of her 9-month pregnancy reminded her of her vulnerability. But instead of fear, a wave of clarity washed over her. This was her moment, and she would not let humiliation define her. She took a slow, steadying breath and met Jelani's gaze. "Jelani," she said, her voice calm but carrying a firmness that made him pause. "I am 9 months pregnant. I deserve respect. I deserve to be treated with dignity, not pushed aside in front of our family and friends." Her words hung in the air, soft yet unshakable, and a hush fell over the guests. The murmurs and whispers quieted as people started paying closer attention. Zuri could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but it was no longer embarrassment, it was determination. "Being a mother doesn't make me weak. Being a mother doesn't make me submissive," she continued, her voice steady, each word deliberate. "I have worked hard, I have built my life, and I have contributed to this family. That doesn't disappear because I am carrying our child." Her words were measured, yet they carried an undeniable power. Guests exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others leaning forward, listening with admiration. She noticed Jelani's grip on her arm loosening slightly, but she didn't move until she had finished. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the stunned expressions, the half-hidden nods of support, and even the discomfort on the faces of those who had expected her to be silent. She allowed herself a small, controlled smile. She could see the shift happening, even if it was only beginning. People were starting to recognize her strength, her courage, and her refusal to be humiliated quietly. "I am not your property, and I am not invisible," Zuri said softly, but with enough force that every word landed in the... "I am a woman, I am a mother, and I am proud of both. I will not be made to feel less than who I am." The murmurs of admiration grew louder, subtle at first, then more audible as the guests began to respond to her courage. Some whispered words of support to one another, while others looked at Jelani with a new awareness, questioning his behavior in the moment. Zuri took another deep breath and straightened her shoulders, letting her calm defiance radiate outward. She realized something important. Humiliation loses its power when met with courage and dignity. And tonight, in that room filled with friends, family, and strangers alike, Zuri was showing them all, and reminding herself that no one could diminish her worth. The whispers of admiration continued, soft at first, then growing steadily. Zuri had claimed her space, her dignity, and her voice, and for the first time that evening, she felt the strength of her own presence echo through the room. The room felt electric, the tension thick enough to touch. Zuri's calm words hung in the air, but before the moment could settle, Mama Aking stepped forward, her face a mask of polite anger. "Zuri," she said, her voice sharp yet controlled, "you must understand that family loyalty matters. Jelani is only respecting tradition, and you should learn to honor your place in this family." Her words were like a cold gust of wind, cutting through the small circle of murmurs forming among the guests. Zuri felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she met Mama Aking's eyes directly. "Respect is not about blind obedience, Mama Aking," she replied steadily. But before she could continue, Jelani leaned in, attempting to justify his actions. "It's tradition," he said, his voice tight. "In our culture, elders are honored first. I was only trying to follow what is expected." His words carried authority, but Zuri could see uncertainty flicker across some of the guests' faces. She straightened further, letting the weight of her presence fill the space. "Tradition does not give anyone the right to humiliate another," she said firmly. "I have worked for years, building my career, supporting this family, and preparing to give life to our child. I have made sacrifices, faced challenges, and maintained my independence. That deserves recognition, not disregard." Her words were deliberate, each syllable a reminder of the strength she had cultivated over the years. The guests were now fully engaged, their whispers shifting into audible murmurs of agreement. Some leaned in, nodding slightly, while others glanced at Jelani with questioning eyes. The tension escalated as Mama Aking's lips pressed into a thin line, and Jelani's attempts to justify himself faltered under Zuri's composed but fierce presence. She wasn't shouting, wasn't gesturing wildly. Her strength came from clarity, from the calm insistence that she would not be diminished. "I will not be silenced to make someone else feel honored," Zuri continued, her voice rising just enough to command attention without anger. "I am proud of my achievements, proud of my independence, and proud of the life I carry. None of that diminishes your place, Mama Aking, but it also does not mean I am to be treated as less than human." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, admiration blending with surprise. Jelani shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny of the room, while Mama Aking's carefully composed exterior showed cracks of irritation. The confrontation had turned the party into a stage for Zuri's courage. Each guest could feel the emotional intensity, the clash of expectation versus reality, and the sheer force of Zuri's refusal to bend. In that moment, Zuri realized something vital. She was no longer just defending herself. She was redefining the room, showing everyone that dignity and respect are earned through character and courage, not fear or submission. The crowd watched, silently acknowledging the power of her words, and the balance of authority in the room began to shift. The air in the room felt different now, charged with a quiet energy that Zuri could feel as she stood her ground. Her calm, measured words from moments ago had done more than defend her. They had captured everyone's attention. Guests who had been whispering behind their hands now looked at her with admiration, their eyes reflecting surprise and respect. It was as if her courage had carved a space in the room where honesty and dignity finally mattered more than tradition or hierarchy. Some relatives began speaking up quietly, their voices trembling but firm. "I can't believe he treated her like that," one aunt whispered to another, shaking her head. "Zuri has always been strong and accomplished. She deserves respect." A few cousins nodded, echoing sentiments of shock at how Jelani had acted. The whispers of doubt about him grew louder, weaving through the room like an undercurrent that couldn't be ignored. Slowly, the social dynamics began to shift. Jelani's authority, which had seemed unquestionable moments before, started to crumble under the weight of Zuri's integrity and the growing recognition of the injustice he had committed. Zuri noticed the change in glances around the room. People were no longer looking at her as if she were a problem to be managed. They were seeing her as someone who had claimed her voice and refused to be silenced. The contrast between her calm composure and Jelani's aggressive, defensive stance was striking. Where he tried to assert power with words and gestures, she simply held her dignity, letting it speak louder than anger or intimidation ever could. Each time she made eye contact with a guest, she could see admiration reflected back, and it gave her a sense of quiet strength that steadied her even further. Even Mama Aking seemed to sense the shift, though her face remained carefully neutral. The tension in her posture, however, betrayed her discomfort. Zuri realized that the balance in the room had changed. Her words had started to redirect the power that had once seemed absolute. People began to engage differently, some offering polite smiles of support, others subtly questioning Jelani's actions with looks and murmurs that he could not ignore. It was no longer just a private disagreement. The evening had become a public turning point where respect, courage, and fairness were now taking center stage. Zuri's heart felt steady. She could feel the energy of the room, the subtle but undeniable shift toward support for her, and it fueled a deeper sense of determination. She wasn't just standing up for herself, she was sending a message to everyone present. Dignity cannot be demanded through fear, and respect cannot be taken from. The crowd was witnessing a quiet revolution in the space, a demonstration of strength and integrity that left Jelani looking smaller, his credibility fading with each passing moment. For the first time that evening, Zuri allowed herself a small, confident smile. The whispers of admiration had grown into a steady hum of approval, and she knew that this moment marked a turning point. She had faced public humiliation and turned it into a statement of power and courage. And in that room, surrounded by family and friends, her dignity shone brighter than any tension, any tradition, or any attempt at control. The party had ended, but the weight of what had happened didn't leave Zuri. Once she was home, she sank into a chair, rubbing her tired shoulders, her mind replaying the scene over and over. The humiliation, Jelani's coldness, his mother's sharp words. It all swirled together, and for a moment, she felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Then, she picked up her phone and dialed Nyasha, her trusted friend and a sharp legal advisor who had helped friends with domestic and family matters before. Nyasha, I need your advice, Zuri said as soon as the call connected, her voice steady but urgent. She explained what had happened at the party, the way Jelani had publicly humiliated her, how Mama Aking had encouraged it, and how guests had reacted. Nyasha listened carefully, asking precise questions, taking notes, and giving Zuri the kind of calm reassurance that only someone experienced in legal matters could offer. By the end of the call, Zuri felt a flicker of clarity. This wasn't just a personal insult, it was a violation of her dignity, her rights, and her safety as a wife and soon-to-be mother. The next day, Zuri began gathering evidence. She reviewed videos from the party, capturing the moment Jelani grabbed her, the expressions on the guests' faces, and the subtle encouragement from Mama Aking. She noted down every humiliating comment, every whispered remark that had targeted her. Beyond the party, she compiled records showing her financial independence, bank statements, contracts for her fashion business, proof of contributions she had made to household expenses. Each piece of evidence reinforced a realization she had been coming to for a while. This was about more than respect. It was about asserting her rights, protecting herself and her unborn child, and making sure no one could claim authority over her unfairly. As she organized the documents, Zuri felt a new kind of energy building inside her. The fear and shock of the party had shifted into focus and determination. She made notes, carefully outlining what had happened, what needed to be addressed, and what she wanted to achieve. She reminded herself that this was not a fight born from anger, but a measured response to protect her dignity, her safety, and her rights. She thought about the people in the room that night, the relatives who had looked unsure, the guests who had whispered in concern, and realized that she wasn't just standing up for herself. She was setting an example for every woman who had been told to stay quiet in the face of disrespect. By the evening, Zuri felt a sense of control returning. She had a plan forming, step by step. With Nyasha's guidance, she would approach the situation thoughtfully, legally, and strategically. She understood now that this moment was bigger than a single argument. It was about reclaiming her voice, protecting her family, and proving that courage and preparation could turn even public humiliation into empowerment. Zuri looked at her phone, her heart steady. She was ready to act. After carefully gathering all the evidence, Zuri met with Nyasha, who immediately introduced her to Advocate Jabari Odieno, a sharp and assertive lawyer known for standing up for women's rights in Nairobi. Jabari listened carefully as Zuri recounted the events at the birthday party, explaining how Jelani had humiliated her in front of family and guests, and how his mother had encouraged the disrespect. He asked detailed questions, making sure every angle was covered. Zuri felt a sense of relief wash over her. Finally, her experience was being taken seriously, not dismissed as drama or gossip. Together, they began preparing a solid case. Jabari outlined legal points that covered emotional abuse, Jelani's attempts to assert control over finances she had earned, and the violation of her rights as a wife and mother. Zuri provided financial documents showing her independence, videos from the party, and detailed notes of the verbal abuse and disrespect she had endured. Every piece of evidence strengthened their position, and Zuri realized that this wasn't just about proving a point. It was about protecting herself and setting a boundary that couldn't be crossed. As the legal strategy took shape, Jabari suggested a parallel approach. Zuri could also address the public aspect of the humiliation carefully, without losing credibility. With Nyasha's guidance, Zuri drafted a social media statement. She wrote with clarity, calmness, and dignity, explaining that she had been treated unfairly and publicly humiliated, but emphasizing that her response was about respect, rights, and accountability. She did not attack Jelani personally, but she made it clear that abuse and disrespect were unacceptable. Once she posted it, the reaction was immediate. Messages of support flooded in from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had experienced similar struggles. Comments poured in praising her courage, her composure, and her decision to stand up publicly while maintaining dignity. The story began circulating across social media, shared by people inspired by her bravery, generating discussion about women's rights, marital respect, and independence. Zuri was amazed at how many people connected with her situation. Jelani, meanwhile, began to feel the pressure. The combination of social scrutiny and legal preparation created a tension he hadn't anticipated. Zuri's calm and measured approach, both online and offline, had shifted the power dynamic. She wasn't angry or vengeful. She was strategic, assertive, and protected by facts, witnesses, and law. Through it all, Zuri felt a growing sense of empowerment. She realized that taking action didn't just serve her own interests. It sent a clear message that no one should tolerate public humiliation or emotional abuse. For the first time since the party, she felt in control, and the overwhelming support around her reinforced that courage and dignity could have a ripple effect far beyond a single confrontation. Zuri leaned back, her heart steady, knowing she had done more than respond. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, and her right to be respected. The next few days were tense for Jelani. The moment the videos and accounts of the party began circulating online, he realized the situation had escalated far beyond what he had imagined. Messages from friends and family poured in, some asking for explanations, others expressing shock and disappointment. Even casual acquaintances who had been at the party were calling him, questioning his behavior, and expressing concern for Zuri. On social media, comments ranged from sympathy for Zuri to outright criticism of his actions, and the overwhelming tide of public scrutiny left him visibly shaken. Jelani also faced a more formal confrontation. Advocate Jabari, acting on Zuri's behalf, met with him to outline the legal implications of his actions. Every attempt to justify his behavior with cultural tradition or family loyalty was countered with evidence. Videos, witness statements, financial documentation, and carefully noted instances of verbal abuse. The legal clarity, combined with the growing public awareness, made it clear that he could not simply brush off the incident or manipulate the narrative in his favor. Feeling cornered, Jelani eventually approached Zuri. His apology was hesitant, measured, and carefully worded, as if he were testing the waters rather than offering genuine remorse. "Zuri, I didn't mean to. I was just following what I thought was right," he said, his voice low, eyes avoiding her. But Zuri had seen this before, the subtle excuses, the shifting of blame, the attempts to control perception rather than take responsibility. She met his gaze steadily and shook her head. "I hear your words, Jelani, but I know the pattern," she said calmly. "This isn't about intentions anymore. It's about respect, boundaries, and accountability. Words alone are not enough." Her refusal to forgive blindly was not born of anger, but of awareness and strength. She understood that change required more than apologies. It required acknowledgement, effort, and real respect. Around her, the support she had built over the past days, from friends, relatives, and even strangers online, bolstered her confidence. She could feel the energy of other women watching, listening, and learning from her response. Their messages of admiration and solidarity reminded her that she was not alone, and that her courage had the power to inspire change beyond her personal life. In conversations across her social circle, Zuri became a quiet symbol of resilience. Friends reached out to share similar experiences, discussing ways to maintain independence and demand respect in marriage. The discussions sparked by her stand were spreading, building awareness and confidence among women who had previously remained silent. Zuri realized that her confrontation was no longer just about a single incident at a party. It was about setting a standard, showing that dignity, courage, and boundaries mattered, and that standing firm could empower not only herself but everyone watching. By the end of the week, Zuri felt a calm certainty. Jelani's apology had not weakened her. Instead, it had reinforced the clarity of her position. She had faced public humiliation, legal pressure, and social scrutiny, and she had emerged firm, respected, and unwavering. Her strength was no longer just hers. It had become a quiet revolution in the lives of women around her, a testament to the power of self-respect and independence. The morning Zuri went into labor, the energy around her was calm, but filled with love. Friends and relatives who had stood by her throughout the difficult days gathered quietly, offering support, smiles, and gentle encouragement. Hours later, she gave birth to a healthy baby, the tiny life in her arms a symbol of strength and new beginnings. As she held her child, she felt a deep sense of pride, not only in becoming a mother but in the courage she had shown to stand up for herself and her rights. Once she had recovered, Zuri channeled her energy into something bigger. She launched a maternal and women's empowerment initiative in Nairobi, focusing on teaching women how to assert themselves, understand their legal rights, and achieve financial independence. The program offered workshops, mentorship, and support networks, helping women navigate challenges in marriage, family, and careers. Zuri wanted every woman to know that their voice mattered, and that dignity and respect were non-negotiable. Her story, already shared on social media, gained even more attention as the initiative grew. Videos of her speaking at events, guiding women, and recounting her own experiences went viral across African social media. Comments poured in, praising her bravery, celebrating her strength, and sharing personal stories inspired by her example. Women from different cities and countries reached out, saying how Zuri's courage had given them the confidence to speak up, protect themselves, and pursue their dream. Through it all, Zuri remained grounded, focused on creating real impact. She had turned a moment of public humiliation into a movement, showing that true power comes from dignity, clarity, and action. Looking out at the women in her programs, the messages flooding her inbox, and the support from the community, she smiled softly, knowing that this was just the beginning. Respect isn't earned through fear. It's owed to every woman, every mother, every life.